Here is the story of Tulsidas. So Tulsidas was born in 1497 in Varanasi in India. And when he was born, there was an astrologer that made a prediction that he would bring a curse upon his father's house. And shortly afterwards, his mother passed away, is the way some stories go. Other stories say that the father determined to get rid of the child and that the mother allowed that to happen or agreed with that. So at any rate, when he was born and he was a newborn, the first word out of his mouth was Ram. So that's the name of an incarnation of Vishnu, a very powerful god in the Hindu pantheon. And therefore, the child was named Rambolo, which means I sing a ram. And when the maid, one of the maids who lived in the house, they were upper-class Brahmins, she heard that the child was going to be put away or sent away or killed. And so she begged for the life of this little baby, this little child, and they allowed her to take the child. So she took the child, she raised the child, stories go from between 5.5 to 7 years, and then she died. And when she died, her husband thought that it was due to the curse that this astrologer had said would come about because of this child. So he put the young child, Rambolo, out into the streets, and he became a beggar. Then there was a monk who had pity on this child and adopted him, brought him to the monastery, and then raised him in that environment. And he spent the next 15 years of his life till he was in his early 20s studying the scriptures, chanting, practicing all of their spiritual practices. Then at that point, he decided that he would become a householder. He fell in love with a young woman. They got married and they had a child together. So he had a small son who unfortunately died as a toddler. And when the child died, it was customary that his wife would go to stay with her own family, her father and mother, in order to recover from the traumatic event of losing the child. So she goes away, and Tulsidas, who is completely in love with her, is so lonely for her that at night he swims across a river to get to the village where she is now living with her family and risks his own life. When he arrives there, instead of welcoming him, she chides him that if he loved God half as much as he loved her and risked his life to see her, that he would achieve enlightenment in this life. So he took that very seriously, and he decided to forsake his life as a householder, including his wife. He went back to his monastery and devoted himself completely to scriptural studies, to chanting, and to his practices. So over the years, he became very well known as a teacher, and he started to notice that every day when he would be giving teachings, that there was a leper who would come and would sit, far off away from everyone else, and he started to suspect that this was not an ordinary leper. So one day, after he had been teaching and everyone had departed, he saw the leper going back into the forest, and he followed him. And when he reached where the leper was, he demanded, "Show me your real form. I don't believe that you are a leper." Sure enough, the leper transforms into Hanuman, who is the monkey god. He's a powerful devotee of Ram, who is sworn eternal loyalty to protecting Ram and helping Ram. So since Tulsidas, who was renamed, I think I forgot to say that, so he was Rambolo, but then when he would live with the monks, he was renamed Tulsidas. So Tulsidas means the one who praises the holy plant, the basil plant, which is called Tulsi. So that's Tulsidas. Anyway, so Tulsidas sees Hanuman, and knowing that Hanuman is so devoted to Ram, then he says, "Please, can you take me to Ram? Can you show me Ram?" And Hanuman tells him that he needs to move to a different city from where he's currently living. So Tulsidas moves to this other city, continues to work in his spiritual life, continues to teach, and becomes very powerful and very famous. For example, one day there is a woman whose husband has died, and the funeral procession is going to the funeral pyre where he will be cremated, but she is absolutely distraught and there's a group of people going with her, carrying the cot upon which the dead man is lying. And she sees Tulsidas and she begs him, I know that you can do it. You have miraculous powers. Please, can you return him to life? Tulsidas calls everyone around the cot, and he leads everyone in chanting to Rama, Lord Rama. And as they chant to Rama, the man returns to life and goes back to his house and continues on. So at this point, Tulsidas also has a dream, and in his dream, Shiva and Parvati, the consorts, they appear to him and they instruct him to translate the spiritual text that he's teaching from into a vernacular language so that all people in India would be able to study these spiritual texts. Now this is absolute rebellion. This is anathema. This will get him to be an outcast, if nothing worse. And he ponders the whole thing, and then he decides that this is what he will do. And then along the way, the emperor at the time, who was Akbar, so now we're talking about the 16th century, so he's born towards the end, 1497, is living all the way through the 1500s, and the emperor Akbar hears about this famous man who teaches and can work miracles. And so one story is that he sends for Tulsidas and wants this man who can raise the dead to come and show him and perform miracles for him. Another story is that Tulsidas decides that in addition to translating these texts, that he will teach mantras to the common people. And he calls them together and he starts teaching them mantras, which is the first kirtan. He's leading anyone who comes in these mantras. And the police find out about this and they tell him, anyone who attends this event will be arrested. So the word goes out that anyone who attends will be arrested. Instead of staying away, 1,000 people show up. And then when there's 1,000 people there, then they can't arrest 1,000 people and send them to jail. So they only arrest Tulsidas. So he ends up in jail. One way or another, he ends up in jail, either by refusing to perform miracles in front of Akbar, or because he has been holding kirtan. And while he's there, because Hanuman had led him to Ram, he decides he will write a poem to Hanuman called the Hanuman Chalisa. And as he writes this paean of praise to Hanuman, all the monkeys in the forest come into the town where he's in jail and start creating havoc. They're like throwing food in the marketplace, and they're climbing on roofs and into people's houses, and they're pooping everywhere and just creating a total mess. So the priests go to Akbar and say, we think that the monkeys are here and creating all these problems because Tulsidas is in jail, so we suggest that you release him and maybe that will solve the problem. So Akbar releases Tulsidas, and sure enough, all the monkeys go back into the forest. And from that point on, Tulsidas was leading mantras, so leading kirtan. He was also ongoing translating different texts into a vernacular language, and he starts creating an entire set of dramas that are called Rama Leelas, or the plays of Rama, that are teaching people who maybe can't read and write, which I think most people couldn't read and write, teaching them all the stories and the life stories of Rama. So he's dedicated, until the end of his days, and is said to have lived to be 126. Some records say he was 111, but he lived a significantly long life, as many of the yogis and those who practice spiritual austerities and lived a very spiritual life, lived a long time. So that is the story of Tulsidas. So I think it's a very colorful and delightful story about the founding of modern Kirtan. Thank you for listening. Please do like and subscribe, and have a beautiful day.